Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving into a genuinely fascinating idea: why financial success is actually way less about your raw intelligence and so much more about your everyday behavior. We're looking at the psychology of money, untangling how wealth, greed, and happiness are all wired together in our minds.
Well, let's kick things off with this quote from Napoleon. It perfectly frames the completely bizarre reality of how we interact with our cash. See, finance is usually taught like hard math, right? But in the real world, human emotions, sheer panic, and greed are what actually take the wheel. Being a quote-unquote smart person just doesn't matter if you totally lose your head the second the market drops.
To see just how wild this gets, let's look at this crazy contrast. On one hand, we've got Ronald Read. He was a rural janitor, fixed cars, swept floors. On the other hand, Richard Foscone, a Harvard-educated Merrill Lynch executive. Well, when Reed died, he literally made international headlines. Why? Because he left behind an $8 million fortune, built just by saving a little bit at a time and waiting patiently for decades. Foscone, meanwhile, borrowed incredibly heavily to expand an 18,000 square foot mansion and got totally wiped out in the 2008 financial crash. He went bankrupt. So you gotta ask yourself, how on earth does a humble janitor massively outperform a highly educated finance whiz?
Well, the absolute crucial takeaway here is that doing well with money is overwhelmingly a soft skill. It's driven by emotional control, patience, your daily behavior, not some complex mathematical formula or a fancy Ivy League degree. Think about it. There is literally no other field, like say surgery or architecture, where a janitor with zero professional training could ever outperform the world's top experts. But in finance, they absolutely can.
All right, let's move into our first section. No one is crazy. Empathy in financial decisions. Look at the data we have right here. It's wild to think about, but the sheer random chance of your birth year completely alters your lifelong perception of money. Say you were born in 1970. The stock market increased almost tenfold during your teens and 20s. So to you, the market is this unstoppable wealth engine. But if you were born in 1950, the market went literally nowhere during those exact same formative years. We're talking about two groups of equally smart people, separated only by the year they were born, going through life with totally opposed views on whether investing in stocks is a safe bet or just a fool's errand. And this brilliantly illustrates the exact same phenomenon, but with inflation. If you are an adult in the 1960s, you watched prices absolutely skyrocket. They tripled. You remember gas lines, you remember your paycheck losing its value basically overnight. But if you're a 1990 baby, inflation was so low for your entire upbringing that you barely even noticed it. It's like this. Your personal experiences make up maybe 0.000001% of what's actually happened in the world, but they make up maybe 80% of how you think the world works.
Which brings us to a frankly baffling statistic. Why would the lowest income households blow $412 a year on lottery tickets, especially when 40% of Americans can't even cover a basic $400 emergency? I mean, at first glance, it sounds completely irrational, right? They're literally blowing their safety net on a 1 in a million chance.
But if we take a step back and empathetically reframe the narrative, it actually starts to make sense. For someone living paycheck to paycheck, where buying a new car or paying for their kids' college feels completely impossible, buying a lottery ticket is often the only tangible dream of wealth available to them. As the saying goes, they're paying for a dream, and you might not understand that because you're already living one. The truth is, we are all just navigating completely different lived experiences, plugging info into our own unique mental models. To further validate why we all struggle so much with this, just look at this timeline. Modern retirement concepts, they are practically infants. The whole idea that everyone deserves a dignified, comfortable retirement funded by their own investments is actually incredibly new. I mean, the 401k didn't even exist until 1978. The Roth IRA was born in 1998. We aren't failing at some ancient, timeless science here. We are all just newbies winging it in a system that is literally only a few decades old.
So, before we jump to judge the financial habits of other people, we should really remember this profound insight from Michael Batnick. Some lessons have to be experienced before they can be understood. You just cannot simulate the heavy emotional weight of a crisis, the sheer panic of a market crash, or the utter exhaustion of poverty on an Excel spreadsheet. We have to leave room for empathy.
Okay, moving on to Section 2. Luck and risk, the invisible sibling forces.
I want you to keep this staggering probability in your mind, 1 in a million. We're going to use this number to uncover the incredible, kind of hidden origin story of Microsoft, and to show you how success is rarely just about hard work.
This beautifully contrasts how the exact same 1 in a million odds acted as monumental luck for Bill Gates, but delivered the ultimate tragic risk to his best friend. Picture this. In 1968, there were roughly 303 million high school-age kids in the world. By a pure stroke of luck, Bill Gates attended Lakeside School in Seattle, which happened to be one of the only high schools on the entire planet that had a computer. That insane 1 in a million head start basically birthed Microsoft. But Gates had a best friend, Kent Evans, who was just as brilliant, just as ambitious. They planned to conquer the world together. Tragically, Kent died in a mountaineering accident before they even graduated. The odds of being killed on a mountain in high school? You guessed it, roughly 1 in a million. It's the exact same force, just working in completely opposite directions.
And honestly, we see this tension everywhere throughout history. Cornelius Vanderbilt wildly expanded his railroads by simply ignoring the laws of New York. Today, we call him a scrappy visionary, but if he'd been shut down by the courts, he'd be remembered as a reckless criminal. The line between inspiringly bold and foolishly reckless is like a millimeter thick. When Mark Zuckerberg turned down $1 billion for Facebook, we called him a genius. When Yahoo turned down a massive buyout from Microsoft, we called them fools. But you only see that clearly with the benefit of hindsight. Like Bill Gates himself points out, success is a lousy teacher. It seduces smart people into thinking they can't lose. So when we're judging success or failure, whether it's our own or someone else's, we really have to give luck and risk their proper respect. Instead of idolizing these extreme unrepeatable examples, like some specific billionaire's morning routine, we should be looking for broad behavioral patterns that we can actually control. Which leads us perfectly into our final section, knowing when it's enough, the ultimate superpower. Take a look at the astonishing rise of Rajat Gupta. This guy started with absolutely nothing. He was orphaned as a teenager in the slums of Calcutta. Yet he rises through the ranks to become the CEO of McKinsey, he gets a seat on the board of Goldman Sachs, and amasses a net worth of $100 million. Just let that sink in for a second. A 5% return on that kind of wealth generates nearly $600 an hour, 24 hours a day, entirely passively. By any measure, he had won the game of life. But somehow, $100 million simply wasn't enough. It's almost hard to wrap your head around, isn't it? But surrounded by the wealthiest investors in the world on that Goldman Sachs board, Gupta actually felt inadequate. He didn't just want to be a centimillionaire. He wanted to run in the exclusive billionaire circles of his peers. The goalpost had completely moved.
Let's trace how this endless greed actually unfolded. So it's the 2008 financial crisis, and Warren Buffett is planning a secret $5 billion lifeline to save Goldman Sachs. As a board member, Gupta learns about this before the general public. Driven by this insatiable desire for more, he immediately leaks this highly confidential information to a hedge fund manager, letting them execute illegal insider trades. He literally risked everything he had built just to scrape together an alleged $17 million more.
And the consequence? Absolute devastation. Gupta went to federal prison. He lost his freedom, his pristine reputation, and his legacy. And he lost all of it simply because he lacked that crucial internal boundary of enough. He risked something he already had and desperately needed for something he didn't have and didn't actually need.
Now, let's contrast Gupta's tragic endless hunger with a famous little story involving Joseph Heller, the author of the classic novel Catch-22. Heller was at a party hosted by this super wealthy billionaire hedge fund manager. A friend leaned over and pointed out that the billionaire host had probably made more money in a single day than Heller had earned from his wildly popular novel over its entire history.
But Heller didn't flinch. He just smiled and delivered this completely paradigm-shifting reply. He said, "Yes, but I have something he will never have. Enough." Wow. It is a stunning realization when you really think about it. Boundless wealth is entirely meaningless if your desires continuously outpace your resources. Knowing when you have enough, that is the ultimate financial superpower.
As we wrap up this explainer, I really want you to look closely at your own life. Are you optimizing your money just for a spreadsheet? Are you actually managing your behavior to finally reach enough? Or are you going to let the goalposts keep moving until you risk it all? What is your enough number? Seriously, think about it, because if you don't define it for yourself right now, the world is going to happily define it for you.